Hey everybody, welcome to the Bob Knakal Show. I'm your host, Bob Knakal. I'm the Chairman and CEO of BKREA. I've been an investment sales broker in New York City since 1984, and I absolutely love this business. And there's nothing I love more than talking to the people who are the titans of industry that make this industry what it is. There are so many people with great stories, great backgrounds. That's one of the things I love so much about this business is the personalities that are in it. So on the Bob Knakal Show, what we're going to do is bring to you the stories and behind the scenes look at what some of the biggest names in the industry have done. The show is going to be filmed in front of a live studio audience. I have a co-host, Jillian Mariutti, who's an expert on the debt and equity side of the business. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's happening in the investment sales world. Jillian's going to talk a little bit about the debt and equity market. And then we're going to get into a detailed conversation with our featured guest, talking about their background, their experience, deals they've worked on, and talk about what really gets them excited about this great industry of ours. Hope you enjoy the show, and let's get to it. The Bob Knakal Show is presented by our friends at CBRE, the most powerful platform on which to prospect, evaluate, connect, and close any commercial real estate transaction. Welcome to the first episode of the Bob Knakal Show. When we filmed this, we weren't really thinking it was going to be the Bob Knakal Show. We were just having an interview with Steve Siegel in front of a live studio audience. I had Jillian Mariutti, my friend and senior director at JLL's Capital Markets Group, as my co-host. And we wanted to talk to Steve and just get his story out to a bunch of folks to hear what an unbelievable background and history he has. Steve has been a great friend and mentor of mine since the beginning of my career. His story is so compelling, working his way up from the very lowest levels within the industry up to being one of the global titans of our industry. And he currently serves as the Chairman of Global Brokerage at CBRE. We hope you love the show. A boy who grew up in the Bronx, but not a Yankee fan. Have to explain that.
Yeah, I was a lonely guy in the Bronx. I had no friends because they were all Yankee fans. And my father was a Giant fan. They played in New York at the time. They're in San Francisco now. And you grow up under your father's wing, and he was a National League fan. I became a National League fan. The Giants left. I waited patiently, and finally the Mets arrived. Still a very patient man when it comes to when it comes to the Mets, but I was a National League fan, a New York Met fan. To this day, I have friends from those days who are still fervent Yankee fans, and I've become a Yankee. I hate the word hate, but I've become a Yankee hater, actually. I like going to games with them when they're playing the Red Sox, so I can be the only one there with a red hat rooting for the Red Sox.
Okay, so Mickey, Willie, and the Duke. Give us some perspective on the three greatest outfielders in New York history.
One great, two very good. The great was Willie Mays, 658 home runs, over 300 lifetime. That man could throw, run. It's what they call a five-team player, asset player. Mickey Mantle, probably next. Duke, solid, no question about it. Good center fielder, solid statistics, but nowhere near Mantle. So I would go Willie Mays, Mickey Mantle, Duke, Snider.
There you go. All right.
Hate to admit I saw them all play. There was only two. So.
Did you watch the ESPN special Once Upon a Time in Queens? It's a 4-episode series about the 80s Mets.
Yeah, but the 80s Mets are not the ones I'm talking about.
I know.
Yes, I did. I could espouse on that team, or the 86 team in particular, which won the World Series, and it was a very happy time.
Okay, not to hit you with a trivia question, who was the Mets' first manager?
Not Casey Stengel. Might have been
Casey Stengel. Yeah. Casey Stengel. Very good. All right, so Steve, you had growing up, you had a couple of jobs when you were young. Tell us about your early employment history.
So, yeah, I was very successful. I delivered leaflets for two things went wrong with this one. I delivered leaflets advertising or promoting the World Book. So the two failures were me delivering and the World Book, which was trying to compete with the encyclopedia, which probably most of you never heard of now with computers, etc. But yeah, I used to slip them under doors, get thrown out of buildings. I was barely 12 years old. And shortly after, I lost my job for not delivering enough, and they lost their business, basically. I have a set of World Book encyclopedias, whatever you want to call them, they're worth a fortune.
There you go. Awesome. And so after delivering the World Books, what was the next thing you ventured into?
The next thing, while I was in high school, I worked at what they called a candy store. What it actually was it sold newspapers at a soda fountain. I was sort of a hack that took empty bottles down to the basement, brought up the fresh ones. And in those days, we had so many newspapers, it was actually spectacular. But you had to put them all together, especially on a Sunday. So for Sunday, so I worked Saturday night sometimes till 11 o'clock, putting the newspapers together, Times, the Journal, the Telegram, and that was my job for, I guess, most of my junior and senior year in high school.
Did the candy store make a good egg cream?
I made the best egg cream. Not only did I make the best egg cream,
for a lot of folks,
still make the best egg cream.
A lot of folks here don't even know what an egg cream is. How do you
Okay.
explain what that is?
The egg cream first started out with very cold milk. Maybe it's in the freezer. You anticipate making the egg cream, and you take it out an hour or so before. And you take a Fox's You Bet chocolate syrup. You put this much Fox's You Bet, this much milk, and then slowly, they don't have the old seltzer bottles, but you slowly but surely pour the seltzer in while you stir it, so it ended up with a very thin white head, and it was spectacular. Don't you all want to try one?
Yeah.
I'll be making them after outside.
Okay, so something you didn't know
Wheel the
about
card
Steve
in.
Siegel, great egg cream maker.
That's
So
correct.
that's
It's on my original resume when I went looking for work. So,
That's
there you go. Okay, so you got a job at Cushman Wakefield, or actually Bing and Bing.
Bing and
Before
Bing,
that, why don't
yeah.
you explain the
When I
first real
graduated-
estate job?
Well, I graduated high school when I was 15. Circumstances, I took 2 grades together, 3rd and 4th, and I took the 7th, 8th, and 9th grades over a 3-year period. I don't know if they still do that. They had SPs, which meant special progress. Really didn't serve me well because I went to high school when I was 12 and didn't do much good for me for dating girls in the school. Sort of pat me on the head like, "You're a nice kid. Good try." So I sort of really kind of hung out more on my corner, if any of you ever read the old books about the Bronx and Brooklyn. So much socializing went there. I had to go to work when I graduated high school. My parents were laborers and middle class, I guess you would refer to them today, maybe even lower middle class in terms of income. And so I went to work in the mailroom of this residential company called Bing and Bing. They owned apartment buildings all along Park Avenue, a hotel called the Hotel Dorset. I worked from 8 to 1. I had a beautiful gray mailroom jacket. In those days, people got mail, and I walked around delivering the day mail, picking up the outgoing, sorting everything. Watched people come in and pay their actual rent, or one of the great actors of all time come in. The whole place was buzzing. Again, an actor most of you probably never heard of by now, Paul Newman.
Oh,
Who
yeah.
was one of my favorites, and on the screen he was a giant, and in the office he was about 5'8". But his blue eyes only equal Frank Sinatra and my father in terms of blue eyes. He just was shockingly handsome. From there, I met somebody in or at Bing and Bing who left to go to work at Cushman Wakefield. Called me up one day and said there's a full-time, by the way, I was going to college from 3 to 7 at City College on Convent Avenue on 37th Street. He called me to say there was a job at Cushman Wakefield.
And you were studying in college. What were you studying to become?
I was just studying accounting. I had lost my mind. No, it seemed like a nice steady place, adding things up for the rest of your life. If you're accounting majors or accountants in here, I apologize. But it was like a sentence to death. But as I thought, the more classes I took. But he had an opening in the accounting department at Cushman Wakefield. I interviewed for it as a full-time job, but it was an income differential sufficient enough for me to save for a car, which I definitely want. So I went to work there at age 17 in the accounting department. And I actually had a lot of fun processing broker checks. That's part of what I did, depositing and so on. And then also doing rent collection for office buildings we manage, and then sort of easily in and out expenses against, and then distributing the checks to the various owners. So that didn't seem like a lifetime of career for me. So I didn't stay at it all that long.
But seeing those big broker checks, what kind of impact did that have on you?
Relative today, they weren't that big, but when I think about them, I guess in present value, they were very big. It made me think I didn't want to be an accountant. So I went in one day and I told the treasurer that this is something I don't want to do, and I'd like to figure out a path to brokerage. I guess I was 18 at the time. And he said, well, let me think about it. We would be willing to pay for your school if you continued to go at night and majored in accounting. So I said, well, I'll get back to you on that one. Needless to say, I turned it down. Thought I might get, let go, but the opposite happened. And he's like one of the people along my life that will always be remembered for opening a door instead of closing it. Could have easily done that. And he gave me the opportunity to become a rent and collection manager for the company, which meant anyone who hadn't paid their rent, it was my job to call them up, get the living crap cursed out of me, but great canvassing tool.
Great training for cold calling.
Hello, Mr. Watson. Hello? I barely got my name out and got hung up on more time than you can imagine. Some great stories, but it also enabled me to get my license and get out of accounting. Get kind of used to being out, and it's not selling, but it was contact with people, human contact, which for me was the most important thing in my life, not just then, but to this very day.
Did you ever ask him why he gave you that opportunity, what he saw?
Yeah, he said he knew I wouldn't be any good as an accountant. He liked me as a person, but he knew that was not where I should be. And it was a great compliment, and we remained, senior, junior, but we remained friends until he passed away. His name was John Grogan, known as Jack or Mr. Grogan. So from being in rent and collections, obviously I was on a different floor, interfaced with a lot of the brokers. I'd already become friends with one of them, who in his own right was a huge success over his career, and that's a friend of mine to this day. And ultimately I kept, badgering to get out of rent and collections before I got killed.
Who was that, Steve?
Don, my friend?
Yeah.
Don Dorenzo was his name. And they said, okay, and they put me in another horrible place called the listing desk. Now, you guys have computers, so you know all the technology that, information is almost a commodity in our business right now. Everybody knows the space available, who's moving where, who paid what rent when they paid it. In those days, that wasn't the case. It was all manual, it was all word of mouth, it was all what you studied. The listing desk had a giant wheel, and on that wheel was every single building in the city of New York with tabs color-coded for the size of the available space. Somebody would call me up and ask me for a report on a particular amount of square feet for a client of theirs, and I would start cranking that wheel, pulling out these tabs, and I typed, and I would have to put them in a report, which was then bound, and this broker would take them to his client. So I was there for, about a year, and I was really torturing my immediate boss, and he said, well, okay, I'll let you do the following. You can work on some transactions if the broker wants to include you, and for whatever he gives you or she, you'll have to just deal with it, but you'll learn. So I did get to do a deal, and I remember like it was yesterday. I got a check from the company for $15.10. That's why I said they weren't quite as big in those days, the commissions. And I framed that check. Said, I'm not going to cash this. This is my first commission check, and someday I will look back on it. Unfortunately, 3 days later, I needed the money. I had to break this. I had to smash this glass frame and pull out that check and cash it. So, and then from there, I was permitted to move into sales after about 18 months. And I guess by that time, I was 21, 22-ish. And I went into brokerage, or salesman in the brokerage group.
And then you became chairman of the company. How did that happen? That didn't happen overnight.
By the way, you find out, you let me know. Well, I was there for, I guess at age 31, I was promoted to president, CEO, chairman, through a long road. I was a broker, salesman. I said something earlier about people. I mean, I loved people and really loved interacting with people, and that would resonate and come through to people. They realized that there was, sincerity in how I felt and how much I enjoyed just being around them. That enabled me to kind of work all around and get opportunities in the suburbs. And I began to get this opportunity to work in New Jersey, which was tedious because you had to drive there, and I couldn't really do a whole lot of appointments by the time I had to turn around and go back. So I decided the best thing for the company to do was, have me open an office. I was 25, and run it in New Jersey. So the only offices they ever opened outside of New York City were to build the Bank of America Tower in San Francisco, Sears Tower in Chicago, Travo, U.S. Steel, PPG in Pittsburgh, and so on. So if you get the picture, they weren't really thinking about their next expansion in New Jersey. So I had to go to the chairman and CEO, terrified everybody in the company, and give him my suggestion. He said, "Are you out of your effing out of mind? And write down what you mean. Give me a business plan." So I wasn't actually a business major. So I went back, I did the best I could, and I just kind of scratched this thing together. Cost of an office, natural overhead, that been admin, secretary, and then the brokers I hoped to hire and how much I thought they might make. And at the bottom line, of course, I made sure there was a profit. And I presented this to him and didn't hear anything for a few weeks. And his assistant called me in. I went in to see me take my wonderful 3-page business plan and throws it at me. And you'd have to know the character, and not enough time in a day for me to tell you stories about him, but he's one of the great characters in the real estate world. And I thought I was, again, gone. And he said to me, "You go ahead with this, and if you fail, you'll never work in this business again." So
no pressure.
With that encouragement, I did open an office in New Jersey. My philosophy, to get serious for a second, was that this was in the 70s when, Gerald Ford said, "Screw you, New York," basically. And corporations were looking elsewhere to save money, get incentives to leave the city. I mean, at the worst times you could possibly imagine.
The city was on the brink of bankruptcy.
City was on the brink of bankruptcy for the first time ever. People didn't even understand it, let alone know what to do about it. My sense was instinctively, whether I was smart or instinctive or both, is that some of these companies would want to go over to Jersey and not just go to far and distant cities, and have a quality of life in the suburbs that they didn't have in this terrible city at the time. And the state was an industrial state, single-story warehouses, distribution facilities. So, I mean, truthfully, most people thought I didn't know what I was really talking about. I took office space. I opened this office. I hired a group of people that I thought would help make this a success. Key in success, in my opinion, one of the majors is hire people that are smarter than you or that you think are and will work as hard or work harder. And I was right, fortunately. The transition to the suburb and the running track and the so-called better quality of life really took hold. There was a book called The Director of Directors, and I would go through that and get directors who lived in New Jersey, and I would contact them at their companies and say, wouldn't it be great if you had an office or a facility over in New Jersey? And it took off from there. And it's funny, the industrial aspects of New Jersey became very subordinated to office. And it's funny how evolution works in business today. They're tearing down those very office buildings and building industrial buildings, which are in greater demand, and the rents on a net basis, that effective basis, are even higher than what they can command for most office space west of Jersey City on. So I was fortunate enough to get the okay to do that. And there are still people at Cushman Wakefield that I hired back then
At
that are
that time.
still there. I played golf with one guy last week, and he has been there 50 years.
Wow.
So I'm kind of proud of it. And the office is, well, I hate them because I'm a competitor now. The office is still very successful.
So New Jersey, and then you get back into the city.
Yeah, well, first I was given, because of the success of that, and I was given responsibility for a region which included 6 additional cities in Boston, Pittsburgh, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, etc. And again, I was able to do something that turned those markets into a bigger success than they had been. I converted for the first time all the managers in the company were commissioned managers, and I converted them all to salary. Wasn't as easy as it sounds. Some didn't want it, so I found someone who did, created an incentive with the growth of the office, and a salary which gave some of them the security they didn't have as brokers, but it removed the conflict. When I was asked once about what do you
Steve,
do,
let's talk about that. I'm sorry for interrupting, but that is such a big issue in the brokerage world today, is the player coach versus the salaried management. You share some of your perspectives on the two.
well, I felt very strongly about uh, managers who were focused on managers early on in my career. I know there's been a transition to the so-called player coach, and at some point, even in my career, I served sort of a dual role. However, it was developing business, but not really implementing, because you can't really do that. Uh, the conflict when you're hiring people to grow an operation and you're a commission broker doing that, manager, and you have an opportunity to sit with a client and maybe pick up a piece of business or interview a potential candidate for a job, or maybe somebody is with another firm that you want. There's no choice of what you're going to do. You're going to go to the meeting with the client. So the growth that could be achieved in a particular office is definitely stifled by that. I remember when I went in to talk to the board at Cushman Wakefield about the conversion to salaries, one of the senior members on the board said to me, well, I don't understand the need for that. It's an honor and a privilege to work for Cushman Wakefield. And again, at 27 now, I said, well, do me a favor, Mr. Caston. I'm going to the bank for a mortgage. When I put down income, honor, and privilege, would you explain to them what that means? So again, I thought, the door was going to be open, but they approved my approach, which was, when you think about it, a very expensive step for a company to take, to add all that fixed overhead on the projection of somebody who said that's going to make them more money. And we were fortunate enough to triple the revenue and triple the profit within 3.5 years. Then I was called into New York City.
And what did they say?
They said I'd been elected president, CEO, chairman. I wasn't even on the board. I mean, I thought it was a joke, actually. Like I call it punk now, I think, or something like that. I mean, I was pleased. I didn't know truthfully, I didn't know what was going on. I was based in New Jersey. I wasn't even based in the headquarters. I always told the joke that nobody knew me, so that made me a great candidate. So there weren't enough any people to say, not him. It was going to be, who is he? So, okay. And I got that job when I was 37. Probably sat down in my office. Second time, I actually cried at work. I
Wow.
closed the door. Still get emotional at the memory. The first time is when I got a huge project, my first big one in New Jersey, after I'd opened the office, which validated that from Prudential. And I remember getting a call from this tough guy that was never called anything but Mr. Rebholz by anybody who knew him. And he called me in my office and told me that I had gotten this 300-acre office park that they were going to develop. And day of two, I got up and closed the door and cried. So there were reasons I cried that weren't good. But
They were positive too.
those were two that were very positive. So
I got a question. What is some advice today that you would give your 20-something-year-old self?
I would, I was really happy with my 20-year-old self because I didn't have, I had no plan that I had to focus on. And if I didn't get there, I could be frustrated by it. My only plan was to be myself, work really hard, which I did. There were no hours and there was no clock in my life. And I still believe to this day, if you're looking at the clock or you got to get somewhere for something that's not work related, that interferes just not only with your work time, but your thought process. So I would give anyone that I could think of the advice that they get in, love what you do, be passionate about it. Today, people are more defined in what they want to do in their life, and they have better concept, and they're more educated, and competition is maybe different. You don't get the openings or the breaks I got without certain background and education. But all the other rules still apply. Work hard, be the first one in, the last one out. I always tell these young kids when I talk to them, even if you got to shuffle papers or just walk around, because I'm a big in the office guy, not home, work from home, and just talk to somebody, because every second you talk to somebody, you're learning something. I still learn something almost every day of my life because I'm opening to learning. And I think that's a critical characteristic that everybody should have. Never think you know it all. So
That's great.
I would give that same advice, and I have given it and still do to people that I speak to.
So 37, you're running C&W. How long were you in that role?
I only stayed in it 4 years because typical me, I really decided then, after all the years managing in New Jersey and the region, that I really loved brokerage, and I wasn't getting enough of that type of people exposure that I loved, or utilizing what I did best. And I was interacting and being able to have people look at me and listen to me and trust me. It's an important thing. You look them in the eye and you're consistent and you deliver the truth. You have the ability to say, I don't know. That's really important. Ever sit in a meeting and say, sure, this is what I would do, da da da, or getting back to you is better. Maybe somebody doesn't accept you because of that, but you've done the right thing, and you'll give them the right answers in the right direction. So I decided I wanted to do brokerage again. So they let me retain the chairman's title, and I did brokerage for, I guess, another 3.5 years at Cushman Wakefield. And then I decided I was going to be a developer. So I
So
actually,
Chubb comes calling, right, Steve?
yeah, Chubb was one of my biggest clients, Chubb Insurance. Everything around the United States I did for them. And they came one day and they had a real estate arm that was mostly suburban. And they came to me and said, we want to do more urban stuff. And we'd like you to leave Cushman Wakefield and we'll back you with X amount of dollars. And the package that they offered in terms of salary and bonuses and equity was, I mean, it was incredible. Of
What
course,
year was this, Steve?
this was 1989, 90-ish, which is the point of it wasn't so incredible because, as I said to you earlier, you have all this technology today that can track markets. Nobody had any idea how bad the commercial real estate market was. And just I jumped right in with both feet, having the kind of backing I had, and I built or bought 2.5 million feet in like 17 months. Built a building in Washington, D.C., bought a 60-story building in Dallas, built 2 buildings in cities in New Jersey. And it was time to lease them. And that was a minor problem in 1991, 92. And I candidly, I knew I didn't want to now kind of revert back and be a real estate broker trying to lease buildings that I had an equity interest in. So I spoke to them about my doing something else, and we parted ways very amicably. I remained a client for years after that. But Chubb Realty, which is the name of my company, after 3 years or so, really was no more. But I did learn, as I said earlier, about learning. I learned a ton. I mean, I didn't know a single thing about development, but I had a head of construction, and I had all the right people, and from them, I learned how to develop the plans and look at them and move things around. I interfaced with some of the best architects in the world, I.M. Pei, Cohn Pedersen Fox, and the building I built in Washington, I'm still proud of to this day. Unfortunately, I projected a rent, I don't know how many of you are in real estate, but of $32 per square foot, triple net. So everything on top of that, and I was able to successfully lease it at 28, including everything. So you can do the math.
A little bit of a
That
difference.
wasn't exactly what they were looking for. So, but fortunately, I mean, obviously, they were so big, it was a dot on their balance sheet, but they couldn't take a chance on the press kind of picking up how badly they were doing in those particular high profile buildings. So I, at that point, decided I would leave and kind of look back at my old business.
Figure it out. And to everybody in the audience, you hear the initials ESG, you think about environmental stuff and then with the impact, the carbon footprint and everything else. But ESG meant something else to you, didn't it?
Yeah, ESG stood for Edward S. Gordon, an individual who, too bad for you that you'll have no chance to meet him, know of him, know about him. He was a super, we use the word icon, I guess this whole thing is icon, a super icon in the industry, a man who was totally underestimated for how smart he was, which was a great strength of his, and had always been after me even when we were competitors. And we used to, when I was CEO of Cushman Wakefield, we would meet once every month or to 6 weeks at a delicatessen on 2nd Avenue and 10th Street to be as obscure so that anyone who would know us as possible. And we would talk about the industry, where it was going, stay ahead of the curve, how to be better than the best. And we became incredible friends. He was a relentless salesperson, never gave up trying to attract me to come to him. And I would never leave Cushman Wakefield to go to a competitor.
Yeah, and for those of you that don't know, ESG was tantamount to what CBRE and C&W and Newmark is today. ESG was one of the big names in the industry, ran a huge company. And as Steve said, Eddie Gordon just had the most unbelievable reputation and presence in the New York City real estate market.
Yeah, he would come up to me. I'd be walking with Wendy, and he would come up behind us and, Wendy, get him to come to me. I'll pay for the kids' college. I'll do this. I mean, he was always selling. He would call me up while I was at Chubb periodically, and when are you going to come back and do what you know how and stop making believe?
So is this in the mid-90s?
One day he called me up and said, "What's your favorite color?" And I said, "Why? Just tell me." I said, "Okay, blue." I said, "Why?" He said, "I want to paint your office." And so he's ready. And he never gave up. So there was a lot of in between when I left Chubb where I would go. And fortunately for me, I did choose to join Eddie and not go back to Cushman or some of the other options I had. And I went there as president and CEO. And I made it clear to him in our discussions, the definition of CEO, because he was such a dominant figure and it was his company. I mean, he literally owned 100% of the company. And he said, I do. And he never violated that. I promised him that if I had a major decision, I'd walk in his office, I'd close the door. And but once we came with a decision, I would never want him to second guess me. And he never did, no matter how many people went against what I might particularly want to do at that time. And it evolved into quite something over the years I was there. He unfortunately passed away in 2000, way too soon.
Just one of the prolific deal makers of all time. You have to tell us, what was your favorite deal that you ever worked on, and why was it your favorite?
Well, John Cushman, who's a legendary broker in our world, who just recently passed away, said the best deal I ever made were my contracts for myself. And he said that in front of 800 people at an Urban Land Institute panel that I was on. One of my favorite times was building what we built together at ESG, but that wasn't a deal. One of my favorite deals was a tax-free exchange deal that I did. Not sure you could do that type of thing anymore, where you can preempt a major sale. You guys being in the business know how tough that would be. But I pitched and met a gentleman by the name of Henry Chang, who owned all the buildings along the West Side Highway with the big Trump on them, but he owned 70%, Trump only 30%. He sold them. Of course, Trump sued him. I guess, just, he picks up and says, who can I sue today? So he sued him. And he called me up for this pitch, his lawyer did, and we won the assignment to find a tax-free exchange for the $150 million sale that he made. And I remember I picked up the phone and called a client friend, really, of mine who owned 1290 Avenue of the Americas. And I said, I had this assignment, would you sell the building? I know your MO is you buy, you hold for a period of time, and you sell. And he said, okay, yes, I'll give you a number, not a penny less, not 1 penny less. And you have till tomorrow at X time to get back to me with a yes or no. So I got Henry Chang on the phone directly, and he gave me a yes within 5 minutes. Paid $1.2 billion roughly for the building. Identified it within 30 days, closed within 6 months. 13 months later, his attorney called me up and said, we want you to sell the building. And I said, let me see if I have the time. And I had the good fortune to then sell it. We sold the Vornado for 1.4, I want to say, roughly. So not only did he sell the West Side tax-free, he sold it to Vornado for a couple $100 million profit 13 months later, and did that with those funds went into some kind of offshore accounts. It included a building in California, 550 South Flower. So that was an exciting deal for a variety of reasons. Obviously, and the negotiations, to be able to preempt the opportunity to buy a building, and dealing with all the international drama, structure, and so on, and having it all happen within a 13-month time frame. So that's
Awesome.
one of my favorites.
Yeah, I want to get back to the ESG years too, because when you joined ESG, basically just a New York firm, and Eddie wanted to grow the firm, and you were instrumental in that. Why don't you talk a little bit about the expansion phase of your time at ESG?
I'm not sure he actually wanted to do it, to be honest with you, but I told him it was a condition of my employment and he embraced the idea of it. And we began to expand. I actually made a handshake deal with a company in Philadelphia $6 million acquisition, and I went into Eddie's office and I watched the color drain from his face because now he's, remember, sole owner and he's writing these checks. So that's what he meant by expansion. So we talked and I said, hey, there's two choices. We can find a financial backer for this type of expansion, but they're going to take our hide, or heavens forbid, but you can look to sell the company to somebody with the intellectual and financial capital necessary for me to go on the road I really want to go on. And he agreed. And we went and met for lunch with a gentleman who owned a company called Owl. It was public, but he was CEO of a company called Island Capital. And he shook hands with us at that very lunch to buy the company, and bought into the concept and the business plan of growing it. And over the next 6 years, we went from 150 million in revenue and basically a tri-state company to 1.3 billion in revenue and an international company. We belonged to an office network known as Encore. So there were like 40 or 50 companies.
And at that point, it was Insignia ESG.
By this, we merged two names. Yes, I apologize. We took the Insignia name, but we insisted on maintaining the ESG, which had more brand recognition than Insignia did in our business. And I met with the Encore presidents in Chicago. I asked for a meeting, and I told them what our plans were, that we were leaving the office network. And I said, we're going to grow worldwide. If you guys would like to join the program, I'm prepared to talk to each and every one of you about becoming an Insignia ESG company. But either get on the train or get out of the way because it's leaving the station. And we made 44 acquisitions from 1996 till 2001. It was fantastic. So you want to talk about deals that I loved? That was really the most exciting business period in my life. I did the due diligence, basically the people due diligence. And I had this partner from Insignia, who was the investment banking head, and he did with me the negotiations, and he did the multiples times earnings. I would negotiate the contracts to keep the people that were key players for each of these companies on board, similar to the conversion to manager process that I did so many years before.
And Steve, was it easier to negotiate with tenants or with brokers?
Tenants. I would get pricing that was, worth, it was 3 times what the value of the company was. They would have a number, I would have a number, and they had, oh no, this is what we're going to do 10 years from now. But I was, successful in pointing out the realities. And it was amazing how many of them wanted to be part of the vision, that there was going to be a desire or a leaning for what you would call what I call at that time, very mundane, one-stop shopping, which was really the kind of sales pitch I gave to Eddie. I said, we represent a good portion of the New York market, and the tenants housed there. These tenants are all over the country. Some of them are all over the world. And you don't want the fox in the hen house. There are other companies that are going to be working with them elsewhere. We need to be in a position to work with them everywhere. And that's when he bought into the expansion and acquisition side of the business. So I think doing deals with tenants, first of all, it's a much, well, they're looking for help. These people feel you're doing you a favor by joining you. But as I said, we did 44 of them, and where we couldn't do company acquisitions, we did people acquisitions. We did people in Los Angeles and Atlanta and other cities that are still with now what is CBRE.
And the company, we've been talking just a couple of minutes about the sale of the company to CBRE.
Yeah, I got to, it wasn't, maybe looking back, it wasn't what I really wanted, but I probably didn't fight against it as much as I should have. Insignia had gotten, I guess, tired of being focused on the brokerage business, and the CEO was into a variety of other referred to them as Island Capital. Island, it was to be a financial group. Island Capital was one of the things he was focused on, marinas around the country, and he started something called Edifice Rex, meaning obviously property rec. Everyone's going to be on the computer. Everyone's going to work and order repairs for their variety of apartments and co-ops. They're going to make restaurant reservations. Tried to remind them that telephones, and they could, and they could also see the super in the building and say, "Hey, my toilet's not working." But he lost $30 million of our money. When I say ours, I mean the commercial real estate arm. And the expansion that I was looking to complete, I was never going to be able to complete without that capital to buy more companies and different your business. I had a debt company in Dallas. I fully negotiated for $25 million, and basically he didn't want to allocate the capital to it. So that's when it was, I guess we should sell. We first actually made a deal to buy CBRE, which would have completed that dream I had. And shook hands because we were public to buy for X amount of shares of stock. And their board turned that down. And then 2 years later, they came to us and said, "We want to buy you." So we, entered into a negotiation. We agreed on a price, just under $500 million. It's probably worth 50 or 60% more than that within 2 or 3 years. But the good part of that deal is we sat down with what I would call a best athlete discussion. Who stayed managing those offices, which were what, the word synergy is used in these type of acquisitions. What it means is two good people have a job and one of them's got to go.
How did you make those decisions? That must have been so interesting. It'd be a fly on the wall for those conversations.
It was the worst possible thing for me to convince somebody that the person I had running Philadelphia or Chicago or LA or whatever particular offices we were discussing was better than the person they had. It was easier than you might think because they really had no presence in so many of the markets we did. So they were receptive to, okay, you're right. We don't have a real presence in Paris. We have virtually none in the UK because we bought their company. Years before in the UK, we bought CBRE, Richard Ellis, and here's CBRE. We changed it, obviously, to Insignia, Richard Ellis. But it still was a CBRE company. They foolishly had divided Europe and the UK. Long story. Not the best business decision they ever made because they basically bought themselves back. But we had presence in the major cities. They really didn't. They opened in New York City with their philosophy was 30 people, every office at each desk, no superstars. You each make X amount. Here's our gross. Here's our net. We'll be very happy. But you don't survive doing that because you don't grab any market share. You don't get the right people to help you grow that market share. So it was easier said than done. But basically, I would say we have the majority of our people prevailed. And again, many of them 20 years later are still there.
How long did that integration take, would you say?
You mean between the two? Culturally, it was like, frickin' frack. I mean, it couldn't be any different. Not that long. In fact, I have to give my wife tremendous amount of credit because they would have national meetings, and those meetings would integrate to the two former competitors, very different people. And she literally would walk around and there would be a table filled with CBRE people. She would say, "Hey, come on, you guys, you, move over there. You guys, come on, from Insignia, you move over here." And it was a lot of camaraderie that was built as a result of those 400 or 500 person meetings. And then I went around the country and the world with their CEO and spoke to large groups of each and every office about what the merger means and what it should mean to them and why they should be happy and not threatened. And so we retained most of the brokers that way. And a lot of them knew us as a firm and our reputation, which was a firm run by brokers for brokers, which was definitely not CBRE. And really isn't today either, but it became the culmination of what I saw or hoped to do. And it's, the platform is, as you know, second to none. I don't even know what the market cap anymore is, but it's probably $15 billion company right now. So that was probably the best deal I ever did.
There you go. Love it. Well, I want to talk about another deal that you did. I want everybody to start thinking about your questions because we'll have a couple of minutes for questions for Steve. But just tell us before we get to questions, you're running around town with Steve Pizicki looking for a development site to build an office building. Why don't you tell us about that story?
Well, Steve Pizicki's SJP Properties means nothing to you, but he has a building, 11 Times Square, very major, a New Jersey developer, and he wanted to be in New York City. So I've looked for a couple sites, and I found this particular site on 8th Avenue, not dissimilar to the Henry Chang swap. I picked up the phone, called the owner, and he too said, yes, I would consider selling. And he gave me one of those. This is it. This is my price. I need to know by Thanksgiving that I have a deal or it's dead. His name was Howard Milstein. Again, may or may not mean something to you. And Howard meant what he said. So we negotiated a contract to sale and all the terms and the lawyers, and
Did Steve agree to the price right away?
right away.
Okay.
Full price. He was that anxious to get into the city. His inclination would normally be to, try to knock to $300 million. We try to knock 20 million off or do whatever. And I just told him, it's just not going to happen. He said, what do you mean? I've never heard of him. He said, I tell you, trust me. I know this man. This is what he says. I promise you he will pull the deal. And I remember spending Thanksgiving at my wife's sister's house in Philadelphia, and we're still negotiating, etc. And Friday after Thanksgiving, he said to me, you're a day late. I'm pulling the deal. And I said, Howard, just, give me this a holiday. I don't give a damn what it is. I told you by Thanksgiving. I called Pizicki. I told him, and fortunately, he signed the contract and sent it back and built the building. Gorgeous building.
Howard countersigned the contract even though you were a day late.
Yes.
Good.
He was so forgiving.
All right.
Especially with the deposit check and the
All right. And
and
11
$300
Times Square was born.
And we were agents, and we leased, I don't know, 60 or 70 or 80% of it until we weren't making any inroads on more success, and JLL replaced us, and I believe they're still the agents.
Awesome. All right. Questions for Steve?
I have one for him
Oh,
before we get started.
sure.
It's about your views on the current state of the market. You heard Jerome Powell last week say that he doesn't think it's going to be a systemic issue or a big blow to the economy, that it's manageable, that banks' exposure to commercial real estate maybe makes up 20%, and a fifth of that is office. So it was hopeful to hear those words. Want to know, what is your opinion?
I was hopeful for him. I mean, seriously, what's he going to say? Oh, we
Yeah,
excuse me, I'm
you're right,
sorry.
right? So how
I'm
much
really-
of that
I'm
is fluff
sorry.
versus what do you think is the truth? How are things going to pan out?
I think they're going to be okay. When you guys were talking about survive to 25, and you don't want to be licked till 26, I was thinking, please, thank heaven, not till 27. But I think that there's a tremendous impact, like nothing I've ever seen on the commercial market. You guys both touched on it, and Bobby articulated the difficulty of mortgages coming due and the interest rates that people are paying, and some not even coming due, but they have floating rates that have floated
Yeah.
from 2.25, 2.5 to 6, 6.5, and even worse. They have to add equity, as you both pointed out. I've done deals where, or almost did deals, and was not able to because the landlord couldn't come up with the equity, and the bank would not fund the tenant improvement allowances, and the deals fell through. So it's far worse than Powell at least said in our small world, which for us is gigantic.
Mhm.
There are a lot of landlords that will not survive this time period. It's happened before, but never to this degree. I don't know if any of you have seen the movie The Perfect Storm. Well, from my perspective, this is the perfect storm in a negative way for real estate. You had the pandemic. You had the issues of corporations trying to decide how many people are going to work in the office and or at home, and going through that up and down decision process. Now, fortunately, leaning much more towards people coming to work and sitting in seats in their offices. You have the interest rates and everything, all of that combining, causing the issues are. But I mean, people are always going to need office space. Time will pass. These mortgages, new owners will come in. There's funds of trillions of dollars worth of money sitting, waiting to pounce on these opportunities. I spoke to a major bank and asked me what I would do. This was a couple of months ago. If I were on the other side and investing, I said, I would buy these so-called D buildings that everyone says are going to be converted to residential, is really the only hope for them. And there was a time that was the case for buildings downtown, but downtown was a manageable, you could get your arms around the community and you could envision seeing it as neighborhoods. You can't do that from First Avenue to 12th Avenue, from whatever, 30th Street to 60th Street. I don't want to live on 48th and Madison. I would buy the B buildings, is what I told him. I would buy them with majority of the purchase price being equity. I would make the investment in those buildings as necessary to compete effectively with the new product that everybody's running to, but at a 30 to 40% discount in pricing. And, of course, I didn't do it because that was not what I did, but these funds are doing exactly that. They're buying buildings that were, $800 and $900 a square foot for $300 a square foot. A major developer investor, I asked how he was doing a month or two ago, and he said, trying to manage my issues with my portfolio while taking advantage of the issues of others. And he formed a huge fund, as did SL Green, as did Brookfield, and there's so many others that are names not that are on household. So I just think that again, people will get in seats, and you can see the buildings already, just for the so-called B buildings. As the supply of that A stuff in Hudson Yards and Manhattan West and Trade Center gets eaten up, people are moving to historical buildings. They're renewing long term. I just heard of a tenant that was in the market, determined to move, renewing for 400,000 square feet, 3,000 something, or 2,500 employees in a building on 46th Street and Park Avenue. 1271 Avenue Merrill was a building that was retrofitted as Major League Baseball, Latham and Watkins, major tenants. 1345 Avenue of the Americas, great view, 750,000 square foot lease with Paul Weiss. And ICI, ICE stands for something to do with immigration, I forgot. So those buildings are already filling up. And that doom and gloom of the vacant 6th Avenue is just not even thought about anymore. And I think you'll see that continuing to be the case. There'll just be new faces, new people signing the leases with tenants, new owners. The venerable families will remain because they're not highly leveraged. The Rudins and the Fishers and the Dursts. They'll be here, and their heirs will be here. But some of the quick rich will be gone. And I've seen that before. And, and Harry Macklow bought everything in sight after the General Motors building and got that dip and lost them all. Rose up again when the market got good. People still put money behind him, and he has a bunch of other projects that he did. Some, actually, most of them residential. But you saw the same thing happen, and it recovered. The General Motors building is now worth more than the $2.2 billion they bought it for then. You could probably even in today's world, sell it for north of $3 billion. So I think it'll come back. The city has the intellectual, don't like to keep referring to that, the best intellectual capital available, and people want to be here. You know, Austin had a boom because of the kids coming out of University of Texas and the type of employee that they could find to house, but there's nothing like this city. So slowly, city by city, will recover. And I think some of them have a long way, but people are coming back to work. New faces will take over these buildings. They'll do what needs to be done to them to make them competitive, and we'll be back in business.
There you go. There you go. All right. Any questions from the audience? Yes.
Yeah, hi, thank you for coming in this evening. Right now, there's a competition for a downstate casino license, and it seems like there are three major players: Silverstein, Related, and Stefan Soloviev. I'm wondering if you have any thought on having a downstate casino license, having a casino in that. Who do you think might likely come out on top?
Well, I think it's more than just Stefan Soloviev, who I don't think is going to get it because he's First Avenue. I can't imagine the UN will allow anything like that anywhere near them. And I mean, Stefan certainly has the financial wherewithal. I think Related has a real shot. The one proposed for Times Square is never going to happen. I don't think Silverstein's really that much in the running anymore, but there is one at Ferry's Point. I don't know who's that. I don't know if that's Steve Cohn. And there's one in Coney Island that may happen. So I think there'll be three licenses, and I think Coney Island, I think it's Ferry's Point. No, it's near wherever
Willits Point.
Willits Point, wherever City Field is, and probably Hudson Yards will be three licenses. And I think, you know, how they're done, who runs them, I think it's a good thing. They'll add jobs. It'll create taxes. It'll create gamblers, but gamblers are already created. So, I mean, there's that. And I'm one of them.
There you go. Another question for Steve? Yes.
Question about, you were talking about Austin, you mentioned the migration of corporations to New Jersey. A lot of that was tax incentives also induced. New York, I'm a big fan. I am a Yankees fan, I have to say. What about the football team? Which way I go?
I'm a Jet fan also.
Yeah, okay. How does New York fare on the tax front? Do you have any opinion
Yeah, well, everybody says our taxes are going to drive companies out of the city. I mean, you saw that Citadel made a big foothold in Miami, and that was kind of the highest profile because that's the size. Alliance Bernstein went to New Orleans. Same time they grew here. Citadel's building 1.5 million square foot building with Vornado and the Rudin family on Park Avenue. I think it's going to be spectacular. You can see my office looks at the JP Morgan Tower, and they told me a month or so ago they're in 383 Madison, the old Bear Stearns headquarters. They're keeping that also now. So they're growing here, and there was rumors of them taking big locations, and they do have. By the way, I was shocked too that JP Morgan has 2,000 people in Cleveland. Oh, Columbus, sorry. I mean, I didn't even know there were 2,000 people living there. but they have 2,000 people there. So there are companies that have gone other places for partial, not unlike the model of New Jersey. But I don't think it's really at New York's expense. I think they can expand on top of it. Wonderful politicians who kept Amazon out of Long Island City because they had no clue what they were talking about on the basis of the financials of it. $2 billion. Oh my God, how can we spend that? Well, you will make $8 billion, but just can't do the math. And a voter doesn't care that they're just saving you. Meanwhile, Amazon is quietly back in the market. They've filled their headquarters, the old Lord and Taylor building. They're in a bunch of satellite spaces with expiring leases, and they're going to re-enter the market. We all know about Google being here. Facebook made massive foothold in New York City. Those types of tech industries actually waking up a little bit. I was at a meeting today, and they're just sort of sneaking back into the market again. And I think that would go for almost every city. I mean, there are some that have difficulties that are going to be hard to overcome, like Chicago, because they have limited zoning. So as fast as they get one of their buildings pretty much occupied, somebody's building another one. And they do have, as everyone overstates out crime here, it's really not anywhere near as bad as it's played out in the press compared to a Chicago. It's like heaven, safe haven. So I just, I'm very comfortable with people who leave, not leaving entirely, and growing here as well.
Yeah. So anyway, I want to thank you for your attention tonight, Sam. Thank you so much. And NYU, thank you so much for hosting us tonight. This was a fantastic venue. Hope you all enjoyed it. I want to thank my co-host, Jillian, for doing an awesome job. Jillian, thank you so much. And Steve, you may not remember this, but Paul and I had breakfast with you probably about 30 years ago. And I remember we were so thrilled that you'd have breakfast with us, and our eyes were probably wide open, listening, hanging on every word you said. And one of the things you said to us when we were asking you for advice was, you be a voracious reader. I'm a voracious reader. Be a voracious reader, but learn everything you can. And it's great to see you still learning everything you can. I certainly, when folks ask me, Bob, who's your mentor in the business, your name always is at the top of the list, Steve. And I think that I owe so much of my success to you. I'm extraordinarily grateful for our friendship. And I have to say, you really are a national treasure. Thank you for being here tonight. Hope you enjoyed the show, guys. You don't want to miss the next episode. Please subscribe. And don't forget, there's an opportunity to be in the live studio audience. So follow us on social media, and we'll make announcements about when the next filming is going to take place. Hope you enjoyed the Bob Knakal Show, which again was presented by our friends at CBRE, the most powerful platform on which to prospect, evaluate, connect, and close any real estate transaction.